Mosio, Dohiju, Che Ugidali Oniga, Che Chickamauga, Gaduwa, Osage. Hello, my name is Mashu Whitefeather. I am Chickamauga, and Gaduwa, Tsalagi, and Osage. I'd like to say welcome and good evening to the people that are listening in tonight. We have a special guest this evening by the name of Belinda Thompson. Are you here, Belinda?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Before we actually introduce our guests and everyone that's here for the show this evening, I'd like to let people know that our bring-in song is the welcoming or greeting song of our Cherokee people, and the song was done by Bo Taylor on his album Rebuilding the Fire, and it's of our Cherokee people. Also, for anyone that would like to call in this evening, our call-in number is area code 718-506-1564. Again, that's area code 718-506-1564. I am the host, Mashu Whitefeather, of the show, and our other host, which is Doreen Bennett, has not come online yet, so she will probably join us a little later. With us tonight, we also have Chimmy Bennett. He's in Oklahoma tonight running the show, and he's Western Band Cherokee. He's the one that's doing the board. We have our producer, Sheila Folger, with us tonight, and then my cousin from Kentucky, Charles Two Dog, is with us. Now, our special guest for this evening is Belinda Thompson, and I've known Belinda for a while. My younger sister, Belinda used to work with her for City Parks and Rec. Am I correct, Belinda?
That's correct. Cookie.
Yeah, she's known as Cookie. That's because when I was little, she was born. That's the only word I could say, and so that stuck with her. Belinda is Cherokee, Shawnee, and Lenape, but she was raised in the Cherokee ways and traditions. Her professional title is that she's a youth counselor for at-risk youth. She has just received her master's degree in teaching here at Columbia College here in Columbia, Missouri, and she's going to be using that degree to teach traditions, culture, and language. And she also has a Bachelor of Science degree in history, in which she did a lot of extreme research on the Trail of Tears. So this lady is a wealth of information, and she's a good friend of ours, and she's helping me get acquainted with the Cherokee community here in Missouri. So, Chalugi Belinda, welcome.
Thank you. This is very, very interesting because I usually consider myself a little bit techno-retarded, and here I am talking to all of these people over a radio show from my home. This is fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this is fun. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine. So you were born and raised here in Missouri, am I correct?
That's correct. I was born in a little town called Waynesville, Missouri. That hospital is no longer standing. And when I was very young, the state asked my grandparents to take care of me because of the difficulties my parents were facing at that time. So I was fortunate in that my grandparents raised me in ways of the Cherokee. They taught me. My grandmother would wake me up every morning. She would say, "Oh, Sonari agaliha," which is, she told me meant good morning, sunshine. So from just prior to 2 years old until I started, well, actually until I was 12, I grew up in the Cherokee ways.
Oh, very good. And you said that the town that you were in when we were talking earlier, that was one of the towns where the people on the Trail of Tears actually stopped for a long period of time. I think you said, what was it, 90 days on the Trail of Tears?
Right. Yeah, the Trail of Tears had lots of spots where disease took over and they just had to stop for a while. And Jerome, Missouri, on the Piney River, the Little Piney River and the Gasconade River both are near Jerome, and the Trail of Tears stopped there and had to rest for a long time. I have done a lot of research in the archives and read a lot of the old diaries of the doctor and the the preacher people who had accompanied the Indians on the Trail of Tears, the Cherokee, as they were coming through. And the diary that the doctor kept about which ones were ill and having to stop in Jerome, all of the things along the way, it was very interesting to read about. At one point, a wagon had rolled over the head of a child, and by the time they were in Carthage, Missouri, the child was fine and up and moving again. There are lots of very interesting stories that happened along the Trail of Tears. It would be very interesting, I think, if our media industry would perhaps take it upon themselves to make a movie that would be very factual and truthful in the portrayal of actually what happened along the trail. I think that would be amazing.
I think it would be amazing if the correct history would be told, period. Because
that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, the American history that's in the American history books is nothing but one huge lie after another, and the real truth has never been told about our people.
Right. There's a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me. It's very enlightening for those who would like to pursue that train of thought. I grew up very Cherokee, and in school I was not taught. I wasn't taught that the Trail of Tears went through South Missouri. Nothing was said about the Trail of Tears, and yet that's why I was where I was. It wasn't until I had children of my own and was studying it on my own, out of public school, and that I learned that, yes, the Trail of Tears did go through Missouri, and that there are some monuments down at Cape Girardeau done by white people. So it's very, very strange that's not more accurate in our history books.
When I was living in Alabama and would drive up here to Missouri, I came through Cape Girardeau because we come in through Tennessee down there, and I saw several signs referring to the Trail of Tears. Yeah. And you know, since you studied the Trail of Tears extensively, that there was not just one Trail of Tears or one trail leading from the southeast where they took. There was like 3, possibly 4 different routes that we took. Now I know one route. But wasn't there like a couple of routes that came through Missouri here? Actually,
there were more like 6. You know, if you've ever had cattle that travel the pasture day in and day out, and they leave a trail behind them, the cattle trails, the trails that the indigenous people came on the Trail of Tears, moved about, much like cattle trails in any field. The reason being that they had to forage for food. By the time they got to Missouri, all of the people making a profit from the Indians coming through, they were selling things at very high prices, and all of the money was gone by the time they got to Missouri, so they had to forage for their food, and they had to hunt, and so they had to take different trails than what had been taken before, just to make sure that they could find game and that kind of thing. There was the northern route, and then there was a route through the West Plains area. The route that sort of generally followed what was the old Telegraph Road, which later became Route 66 and is now I-44. There are 4 main routes that came through Missouri.
I didn't know that. I didn't realize there were that many. And of course, they waited. They got held up for what was it? I think a couple of months in the dead of winter.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, my history book. My daughter went to school in Fayette, Missouri, and when she came home and they were studying the Trail of Tears, I was amazed that they were actually studying it. It said her history book at that time told her that all of the Cherokee had been gathered up by the 1st of June, but the decision was made to wait until late October to begin the journey, waiting for better weather. And if you think about that, we're telling our children not to use their critical thinking skills because you have all of these people with barely clad, most with no shoes, waiting in the hot sun in pens, prisons basically, all summer long. Yes.
Yeah. And in the heat of the Southeast.
Exactly.
Before they started, and then they started during the winter, and then the winter that year was one of the worst winters on record.
Yeah, they had to wait for better weather. That's how the history books fund that particular bit of history. I was amazed, and I asked my daughter's teacher if I could come and speak to that, and of course they wanted me to give them a transcript of what I was going to say. I didn't really go for that, so I did make sure my children knew the truth of what had transpired along the Trail of Tears, however.
Well, you appreciate this then. I lecture all over internationally on our Cherokee people and our history and our traditions to a degree. And when I was in Alabama, one of my sisters says, okay, we're going to have you be the main speaker. And I said, okay, I've done that for about 40-something years. She says, you can't mention anything about religion, and you can't mention anything different than what's in history books. And I said, okay, stop right there. I said, number one, I am an elder, and I am a warrior. No one tells me what to say.
Yeah.
And you as my sister know that. And I said, I've been lecturing for a number of years. I know how to talk to people in a good way, tell them the truth, the naked truth about what happened in our history, and I do it in such a way where they walk away saying thank you. I don't make people feel guilty. I don't think anybody in this day and age should be carrying the guilt of something their ancestors did, unless, of course, that same treatment is being carried on today. Then that's when you carry the guilt. But there's a right and a wrong way to tell history, but no matter whose history it is, no history is perfect, no people are perfect, but you tell the truth so in hopes that the same mistakes won't ever be made again and people are not made to suffer the way they did. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So you've been very familiar with this area since this has been your home. And of course, I left when I was 17 and decided to return when I was 65. So I kind of missed out on a lot. One of the things that surprised me, and I think you and I have talked about this before, was that we actually had a powwow here. And this is, well, not the first place, but I met you first at a store here called the Best of the West when I was being interviewed for the Cherokee language at the University of Missouri. And after that, we met at the powwow, and that in itself was really a big thing to me because when I was growing up here in Missouri, I thought we were the only Native family in town. And then I saw all these other skins come out, and I'm going, where were these people when I was growing up?
I have often thought the same thing.
Yeah.
And I, I don't know, other than maybe we were all so busy hiding. When you and I were growing up, Mashu, it was a different thing. Yeah, we really did not enjoy the freedoms that we have now, especially here in Missouri. There was I don't know a real politically correct way to say it, other than there were a lot of racial prejudice difficulties that my ancestors incurred, things that they had to deal with that we don't have to anymore.
One of them, I don't know the exact laws, and I think somebody was telling me what was actually going on, and it was almost as bad as it was in Alabama, if not worse. I know what it was like in Alabama. Up until 1967, you were known to be indigenous of any tribe. You lost your home, your livestock, your property, and up until 1985, if more than 2 natives were seen speaking in public, you were arrested. So a lot of people, if they could pass themselves off as something else other than, a native, they did. If they could pass for white, or if they could pass for mulatto, or if you heard the term Black Dutch. If you ever hear the word Black Dutch, you know they're Cherokee.
Yeah.
And I heard that Europe was just as bad.
It is. It was, and many of my relatives called themselves Black Dutch, and they were very proud. We're the Black Dutch. Yeah. Well, I know that when we were small and growing up, when we would go to town to do our grocery shopping on Saturdays, I was always told to not speak to my grandfather. He could not hide the Indian-looking features and skin color. He could not hide it, and everyone knew he was indigenous. So I was told, because I was, according to my grandmother, I was blessed with very fair skin. My grandmother said I wasn't to talk to him or act like I even knew him when we were in public. Mm-hmm. And so she never really explained why. She just told me that that's the way it was. You don't talk to grandfather in public. I thought maybe he was a criminal or a really bad guy or something, but it turns out it was just that he was indigenous. I didn't learn that until after Grandpa was gone.
And the reason that was done is our people did things to protect the family.
Exactly.
And what I tell people is that when we first had this onslaught of Caucasian migrants coming onto our land, our people, in order to stay on our ancestral land, that was the important thing to us, and it still is, to be on the land of our ancestors, because this has always been our ancestral land, especially in the southeast around the Smokies. And that's the whole southeastern part of the United States was originally our Cherokee land. Our people started to dress like the white people because we just thought, well, if we dress like them, then we'll be able to stay. They won't look at us as a threat. And then the next thing is that if we show up in their churches, in their Christian churches, not that we believed in that, but if we showed up, they would think that we were all right. And, of course, our people did that. And, of course, we know from history that didn't work. Our people were still gathered up, taken on various routes on the Trail of Tears in the mid-1830s, and we lost 1/4 of our total population through death, and it was mostly our elders and our children that could not withstand the harsh winter of that time. And, this is something that our people still never forget. I'm sorry, what was that?
That's true. To put the Trail of Tears in perspective, the terrible death that happened on 9/11, 2001, over 3,000 perished. The terrible death that happened over the winter of 1838, over 4,000, 4,000 to 6,000 perished at the hands of our government. And nobody really talked about that. But those, I can remember my grandmother and one of her friends sitting in the milk barn on top of a milk pail. She was smoking a pipe. and they were crying, talking about those who walked and who didn't finish the walk, and they were still crying in my childhood over those who perished on the trail.
And I understand that because I get like that when I'm lecturing. If I'm talking about either the Trail of Tears and the hardships that our people went through, or I'm talking about the lack of respect this country has for our warriors and our veterans, I almost break down, and I have to stop because I know if I say one word more, I'm just going to totally lose it. And after one of my lectures, one of my aunties was there, and I said, geez, I just hate being like that. I said, I wish I could be like our old-time orators where they just kind of go, and then they go on, you know? And my auntie said, no. She says, you don't want to change mashu because the way you are, the people know it's coming from your heart, and you still feel it, and that's the way our people are. And, our people who are truly traditional. And I said, well, I can understand that, but the thing is that I have a lot I want to say, and I want to belt it out so people can hear it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally empathize because I know exactly the feeling you're talking about. And I absolutely agree with your auntie. She was correct. I think people are more able to receive if they know it's coming from your heart instead of, coming sort of like a billy club. Listen to what I'm telling you. If they know it's coming from your heart, I think it's maybe better received.
Yeah, but I like my ududu, which is our word for grandfather, and my iduchis, my uncles, my great uncles, iduchi ikwa, they would sit there and they would talk and they would tell stories and they would get, and they would go. And I've seen this with other tribes too. They're old time orators, and we have a lot of orators in our family. They go, and then they just go on, and they kind of break up and they go, just like clear their voice and they go on. And I always was fascinated by that, but I guess I never acquired that.
I think I agree with your auntie. I think it's a good thing that your heart is still touched and expressed.
Well, I think it's because I've always been told the history of our people. With me, what's funny with me is that it was my grandmother, my mother's mother, that made sure I knew almost all there was to know about our people and our history. And it wasn't until I had become almost an adult and had moved away that I found out that my brothers and sisters weren't taught the same things that I was. I was singled out. And I was amazed. I was amazed when I found out that my brothers and sisters hadn't received the same knowledge that I had.
I have that same phenomena. My brothers and sisters stayed with my mom and dad and did not have the advantage of being raised by my grandparents that I had. So they knew that we had indigenous history, but they still, didn't really make it. It wasn't personally theirs, and it didn't really live in their heart. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. The thing that brought it to mind was my youngest sister. Her traditional name is Kanogi Sagunagei, or Blue Wing. She came in one day and she goes, "Geez, you're really into this Indian stuff, aren't you?" And I went, "What?" "What are you talking about? That's what we are." She says, "Nah, really?" And I said, Didn't Grandma tell you about this, Didn't Elise tell you? And she didn't even know what Elise meant. And I said, Grandma Johnson, didn't she tell you about that? No. And then I asked my other brothers and sisters after that. They weren't told hardly anything.
Right. I had that same experience.
Yeah, and my Elise, Eli Ududu, my grandmother and grandfather, they're the ones who told me Grandma, her name was Chiswageya, bird woman, and my grandfather, her husband, was Tawudi Ngati, Black Hawk, and they made sure that I knew these things. And do I know everything? Of course not. No person knows everything about their culture or anything like that. It's always a continuing education.
Yeah.
But and I think you're probably ended up the same way that I did, where we are probably the only keepers of it within our family.
Well, several of the family members. I'm sorry. Some of my family members come up to me and say, "So you know all about this Indian stuff? How do we get a card?" And I always laugh.
I don't care to have one.
Yeah. Well, growing up, I listened to several of my relatives ask my grandfather why he didn't get a card. You know, go get a card. You can get free medical care. And he'd say, first of all, if I don't earn it myself with my own two hands, then I don't really need it. And then he'd say, you know, you can pedigree my cattle, you can pedigree my dogs, but I'll be damned if you pedigree me. He did not want to be treated like cattle and have a pedigree. And so, out of respect for him, I've never gotten a card. Many of my relatives have their little ID card that says that they are a pedigree Cherokee or Shawnee, but I cannot do that because I can remember seeing Grandpa's face. He was very adamant and felt very strongly that people should not be treated like animals.
My Idoda is still alive. My adopted dad is still alive. He's 91, and we have been enrolled in a couple of state-recognized tribes in Alabama, and we left all of them. 144 members of our family left those bands down there because they were not doing anything to educate the people. Most of my family are federally recognized. Our particular family unit here are not federally recognized, and that's because the last person that I know of to be enrolled was on the Georgia rolls, and that enrollment is not recognized by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a part of the Department of Interior, which recognizes tribes, and they have the final say on which tribes are, or who is officially recognized as a tribe. The enrollment. So, and then we found out that we were getting into a lot of tribal politics that were not good for our spirituality and for the way that we were brought up traditionally. So my Idoda says that we stay away from that because we stay away from the politics. We don't need anything to interfere with our spirituality, and so we just kind of stayed to ourselves. And the people who were sincerely interested in learning the old Cherokee ways, Idoda said they would find their way to us, and we would welcome them. But the only way that they would come onto a land is that they would understand there was no politics, there was no disrespect, and there was no drama. It would only be respect for our traditional Cherokee ways.
Yeah, that sounds like a wise grandfather. My Doda, he. I was young and had a lot of questions, as most 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds do. Why, Grandpa? Why Doda? Why Doda? And he would say, when you're supposed to know, you'll know. And it used to really frustrate me. But then I figured out that as an adult, that was something that maybe was specific to the Tsalagi, that you'll know when you need to know, and it will happen when it's supposed to happen, that these people will be brought to you. My grandmother taught much the same as yours did, I think. Mashu?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? That's a pretty common teaching for a lot of tribes across Turtle Island, but I was brought up with the same thing, is that the things you are supposed to know will not come to you until you are ready for it, and it's time for you to have that knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard that same thing through other tribes, because I've traveled all over the country going to powwows and meeting other people, and then I was married into another tribe for about 30 years, and I heard the same things there. So, this is one of the things that I tell people on my journey is that as indigenous people, we have over 1,000 to 1,500 tribes with that many different cultures and languages. And we have a lot of things that are alike from tribe to tribe, but we have even greater differences culturally, because every tribe has its own culture, has its own belief system, has its own language, but we have a lot of similarities also. And those, I think, are on the basics.
Yeah. I don't know how many tribes actually practice the going to water. That's something that my grandparents did and taught me. As I meet and interact with the Tsalagi people that I come across, not many do that. Some of the old festivals are no longer observed, and I'm really sad about that. And my grandmother taught me about something she called little people, and you're not supposed to talk about it after dark, but
right. Yeah, see, and I grew up with those too, but I found a lot of tribes have the stories of the little people. Not
really?
Just. Yes. I've talked to lots of people from the tribes about that, but as far as I know, it's only us, the Southern Iroquois, that go to the water. And this is one of the things that I've always been teased about, especially living up in Ho-Chunk country for as long as I did. I said, come on, let's go to a sweat lodge. No, our people don't do that. I said, we go to water. So then they would always tease me, Mashu's afraid of the sweats. And I said, no, you can go ahead and say what you want, but I know who I am, and I know where I come from, and I know the ways of my people, but yet I'm here helping you with your sweat. The fact that I don't go in, that what I'm doing to help you negate that. And then they say, oh, you want to go to Sundance? Oh, our people never did that either. I had a Cherokee, I still have a Cherokee brother-in-law that has been pierced 4 times with Lakota Sundance, and he ended up as a patient of mine when I was in Wisconsin. And one of the nurses says, I went in and asked your brother-in-law why those marks, those scars were on his chest, and he told me to come out and ask you. So I went into Frito and I said, man, what are you asking her to come out and ask me for? I said, I don't do that. I said, I get up every morning and give thanks I was born Tsalagi, so that I wouldn't have to have holes in my chest like those Lakota. He was just laughing.
Yeah, there are definitely lots of differences.
Yeah, and I told and I explained it to the nurse, that's a different tribe's way of worshiping, and I said, our people don't do it, but we know about it, and we respect that way. And so that's something that was a little bit of an education for her. And you were talking about the little people. These are medicine people, and some of them are very mischievous. But they are people that dress and do everything just like our own traditional people. And I haven't done that yet here, but I always have an altar out, and I feed the little people because they always protected my place.
Yeah.
Wherever I've lived, and those are very sacred people to us. And you'll never see them, and if you do see them, it's bad luck. There's something that's going to happen, but you usually catch a glimpse of them out of your eye. They're so fast. They are so fast. But we are the ones that where I used to live always like raw cookie dough, so I'd always put out on the altar red material and raw cookie dough. So they like that red material to make their traditional clothes,
Yeah. My grandmother told me. Yeah. My grandmother told me that the little people could be mischievous. And if you find some odd little thing in the woods, leave it because it belongs probably to the little people, and that sometimes they would be a help to lost or endangered children.
Yes. And then I know other people that have come to visit me have been the target of the little people because they lay something down and then they couldn't find it. They'd look all over for it, and then they'd find it exactly where they left it, and they go, "Well, it wasn't here like 5 minutes ago," and that's the way some little people.
Yeah. I've often wondered if you lose your car keys and they end up someplace you can't imagine. I'm thinking maybe the little people are trying to tell me I should stay home, huh?
Yeah, I better not go to work today, eh?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's anything to attribute to the little people or not. And I'm quite sure the people I work for would not really understand my reasoning.
That's the one good thing. I had my staff trained at the hospital where I was at for like 25 years. I would always work the holidays, the white man holidays, because I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in Christmas or any of the other stuff. So I would work their holidays so they could have off with their families, and then I would take off for ceremonies or powwows and stuff like that. And that worked out really well. So I kind of had my staff trained. I also did in-services on how to deal with indigenous American clientele as patients and how to respect traditions in ways, because we live in a very thickly populated area of indigenous people in Wisconsin. I even got for flatbread was on the menu for indigenous people. I showed them the quick way to make that. And just educating, and that's what I look at as our role, and especially with your background, is educating the people around us as well as educating our own people.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of people that I work with at-risk youth at the Armory, and I told them this last weekend I was going to powwow, and they said, "What's that?" Well, then I got to tell them about it, so we get together and do various ceremonies and dances and trade and one of the little ones asked me, "Are there still Indians around?" Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, they're looking at one. So yeah, it's something that the general mainstream media just doesn't really portray, that there are Indians still living and protecting that indigenous culture.
For years I was the evening supervisor of a 555-bed hospital in Evanston, Illinois, and I would have to go around making the rounds of the whole hospital. And I went into our cardiac care unit, and there was this elderly lady. This was probably about 20 years ago. And at that time, my hair was very long and braided, and I wore a headband, but I always dressed traditional. And I walked in, and I was checking her oxygen, and she goes, "Excuse me, are you an Indian?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I am. I'm Mr. Whitefeather. I am the evening supervisor here." She goes, "Oh, thank God." And I said, "Why? Is there a problem?" She goes, "No." She said, "I've been hallucinating off and on for the last few days, and I thought I had slipped again." And I said, "No." I said, "I'm real." I said, "I'm Cherokee and Osage," and I said, "I'm here because I'm married into the Ho-Chunk Nation, and I've been here for a number of years." And this little lady went on to tell me how she and her twin sister were born in the back of a covered wagon in Nebraska, and it was the Omaha tribe that came and helped her mother deliver her and her sister. And I get fascinated by those stories, of the time back when, and how our people interacted in a really good way. And so I sat and talked to her for about 15, 20 minutes, and she was just elated. And I come back probably about an hour later to check on something else, and the head nurse of the cardiac care unit said, boy, she says, you should have been here about 20 minutes ago. And I said, really? I said, what happened? She said, well, this woman's children came in, and she was telling them all about this Indian guy that she had met, and how we were talking and all that. And the daughter, I guess, came out and said, we think Mom's slipping again. She thinks she was talking to an Indian. And the nurse said, well, she was. That's Mr. Whitefeather, and he's our PM supervisor. And she said they had quite a nice little talk in there. And it's just amazing how people, even back then, and that's really just a few years ago, 20 years ago, think that our people are all dead and gone and that we don't exist except in movies, and maybe there's a couple sitting on an oil well out in Oklahoma. But they don't realize that our people are still here and our numbers are still good. As a matter of fact, there's more of us now than there was at the time of Columbus. It just doesn't seem as much. Say what?
I didn't realize that we were more than when Columbus was here. I know that it seems to me that there aren't enough of us.
The reason our numbers and population don't look as big is because the non-indigenous population is much bigger. So therefore we don't look as big as we did. But also our people didn't mate 24/7. Our people had certain times of the year that we would procreate. How do you like that word? Because of the traditions of our people, whereas other peoples from around the world, I mean, there was no time set aside for that, and and this is what my grandparents told me. And passing that on. So
yeah, there were various where you couldn't be mixing the male and the female. There were lots of times and ceremonies where that just wasn't done.
And still is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to let the people know if anybody wants to call in or has questions. Our call-in number is 718-506-1564. Again, that's 718-506-1564. Does anyone here on the panel with us have any questions for Belinda? Maybe want to bring up something that we haven't covered yet?
I think you're covering it quite well.
I thought I was alone again.
We got cut off again.
The only thing we had was they asked us to go to a little program for nursing home, and I did, and we did. We went in, showed some dances, and talked to people, and then on our way out, there was two ladies in this other room over here as we're going down the hallway, and she looked at me in full regalia, and we looked at each other, and one woman, they're both about 90-some-odd years old, and she looked at the other woman and said, "Circle the wagons, Margaret. Grandma said they'd be back." I busted out laughing so hard I couldn't stand myself. But anyway.
My late wife wanted me to write a book on the stupid things that non-Indian people have said to me in my life. Things like, I was at work at the hospital, and I always dressed traditional, always wore a lab coat, and this little black kid in a three-piece silk suit came up, and he said, "God, is there a Halloween party someplace?" I said, "There must be. Look at the way you're dressed." Because I learned how to turn it back on him, on whoever said it. "Oh, are you an American Indian?" "No, they make those down in Kenosha at American Motors." And the last thing they expect is for you to come back with an answer. And at first, when I was growing up, I wouldn't say anything. But I felt I'm not going to acknowledge their ignorance and their stupidity. But then it dawned on me that by me not saying anything at all, they thought I was just, in their eyes, another dumb, ignorant native. So learn to take what anybody said to me and turn it around where it fits them. So, and I did that was to teach them a lesson.
Yeah, I have an incident like that where I was at a powwow, and a little bronze-colored, I think probably Mexican boy, about 6 years old, came up to me and asked, "Are you a real Indian? Or are you a real person? Like, Indians aren't really people." I thought that was pretty telling. I said, "Yes, I'm a real person, and I'm a real Indian." Sometimes hard to know. Go ahead.
And the thing is, if they're Hispanic, they're probably native themselves, and they just haven't been. Yeah, one of the ladies I used to work with had her grandchildren there, and it was a little girl. She was just as cute as could be, and I knew this lady really well, and I know she was so pro-Indian and always backed us and everything that we did. And her little granddaughter was there, and she goes, "Are you a real Indian?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you?" And she looked at me and she goes, "I'm a human being." And this was a little girl, maybe like 2 years old. And I just looked at Betty and I almost started laughing. And I said, "So you're teaching your grandchildren that that we're not human beings?" And she was. You should have seen the red shade she turned. And I knew she did, and she would never do that. But we got the biggest laugh out of that. And she says, "No, Mashu, I would never do that." And I said, "I know, I'm just teasing you." But I said, I never expected that answer to come out of a 2-year-old little girl. I'm a human being.
It's kind of amazing. I wonder where they think that Indians aren't people, but maybe the media has portrayed us as something not quite human.
Well, that's exactly.
I know didn't help us any.
If you look at the history books, I said if you look at the history books, any history book in this country, we were the enemy, and the European migrants were the ones, because of their manifest destiny, were the ones doing things in the righteous way. Everything they did was right, and because we were the pest and we stood in their way, we were the villain. And that's the way the history books in this country are written. They may have lightened up a little bit in the last few years, but as a rule, no. And that's because that they really believed in this manifest destiny thing. So, well, it's true. And they thought that they had the divine right to come in and take our lands and kill our people. And it was just up until almost the 1900s that out in California, they go out on a weekend that just for fun, they'd go out and shoot Indians like they would birds or a rabbit or deer or something like that. And this is what people don't know, and this is something that the government regulates and makes sure that are not written in the history books, because they don't want the American people to know the truth of the history of this country and how it's gotten to where it is today. And this is why people like you, Belinda, and myself and my cousins that go out and lecture and tell the truth are so important to get the truth told in this country, especially about our people and our role that is in the history, and our people are still making history today, and to set that straight. It's also why shows like this on this new technology called computer and internet is important, because you will not hear these conversations on mainstream media or on mainstream programming, because this is the truth that that the government does not want people to know. So here we're reaching, instead of just in our country, we're reaching people all over the world, and the truth is getting out. And this is why I give thanks for this kind of technology today, and for people like us. And I'm not saying I'm the best, but I do my best, to put the truth out there.
Well, thank you for that. And I have to tell you that until I met you, I really felt like this almost Don Quixote kind of person with way too many windmills in my that I felt all alone, and I'm so glad that there are others who are taking up the call to make sure that the truth is known.
Yeah, we have to make sure that we have to make sure that the people that are out there doing that are telling the truth, and because there's people out there that claim to be, and we both know this, and what they're telling is nonsense, and that hurts us, and that's one thing, you know me, I'm a joker, I love to have fun, but when it comes to tradition and the ways of our people, mashu don't play. Mashu don't when it comes to that, because those are things that are too important to me, and I want them to be passed on in the right way and be taught in the right way. And if I don't know something, I'm the first one to tell you, hey, I don't know the answer, but I'll see what I can do to find out for you. And I have elders that I can ask, elders that are trustworthy and that I know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I know that the traditions that my grandparents taught me are something that I want to see continue, and the tradition of respect, and the tradition of being a right way and a wrong way to do things, and yet I'm thrilled that I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, I know when my son is around, he's my eldest son. He's the one that I've been just amazed at when listening to him talk when I've done ceremony or circles, and it's like there's an ancestor talking through him, because the stuff he's saying I know is correct, but it's not the things that I've taught him. I didn't feel he had been ready at that time to have that particular kind of information, and so when he's not around, then I've picked out a nephew that is going to be responsible for making sure that these things live on, with our family in particular, because you can see which ones are leaning towards that way and will do the things properly, and that's what we as a people have to do, within our family unit and within our communities as well.
Yeah, it's like I didn't understand it at the time. When my grandparents were teaching me things, they would tell me a story, and they would tell me a story at bedtime, and I would listen to the story, and then the next night they would ask me to repeat the story back to them, and then they would tease and make fun of the parts that I didn't get quite right, and we'd do this again and again until finally I got the story exactly correct. That's
was
part of how.
Yep, that's one way to make sure that the things are passed down accurately. And another thing that goes along with that is that we would hear the same stories so often that you could actually repeat them word for word.
Yeah.
And as a kid, you never go, not like today where you go, I've heard that before, and get up and walk out. No, you never did that.
Yeah. Well, my grandpa, my Gaduwa was especially good at finding ways to tease me for little tiny things that I had missed. So I had a real vested interest in making sure I got everything exactly right.
Yeah. I think we were brought up quite similar.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something.
No, I was listening.
That hardly ever happens to me. I usually have to fight for a place to say something, Yeah, but yeah, you know what? I can see us, because I've talked to you about this before, where we're working together to do things here in Missouri to bring our people more together, and to make sure that these things are done and taught in a good way and in a right way. And
I would love it.
And I think the thing that God, this year especially, I've heard of so many one-day powwows. That's the first thing I talked to you about. I called up Belinda and I said, hey, what's going on here? I said, who's going to come to a one-day powwow? We got to throw a real powwow that lasts for 3 days and do it in the right way so they know what a traditional powwow is here. So she set out, and we're looking for the right people and the right place where we're going to start bringing tradition back. Eh?
Gee, absolutely. One of the things that I'm also excited and hope to come to pass is the traditional adahuna. I've been doing that either alone or with just my immediate family for so long, and there are lots of celebrations and important things that
all the ceremonies. We have 7 ceremonies that are Cherokee. 6 of them are done for 6 years, and on the 7th year, it's when the 7th one is done. And that's the election, the traditional election of the chief. Our chiefs were not in for life. They were either, they could be if they were voted to be in every 7 years, but you also took a chance that a new chief would be elected, and that's one way our people were different. That's the old way. That's the way I was brought up. And that's what that 7th ceremony was. So
I've often heard politically, wait, there's a 7th year coming. And that doesn't mean anything to anybody who's brought up with my culture. There's a 7th year coming.
Yeah, and then if the chief was not a good chief, the beloved ones and the women would take him out. They had the power to take the chief out, and then a new chief, there would be a new chief put in. Yep. So that's one thing. I think it's about time for our break, and maybe we can go out. Oh, I just said they have 1 minute. Geez, I don't know if I can talk for a whole minute here. So the phone number is area code 718-506-1564. Again, that's 718 area code 506-1564. And I think we're going to take our break now. We'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Join us on Just Us Radio Network for our shows Inflowment, Unity in Community, Numbers in Time, The Indigenous People's Voice, One Point of View, Walking the Talk with Kurt, and the People's Round Table. Check out our website for information about upcoming shows. Just ask Google to find Just Us Radio Network, and you will find links to our website and to our Blog Talk and Facebook pages, as well as to our podcast, where you can subscribe for automatic downloads.
OCO, and welcome back to Indigenous People's Voice. We have a surprise for everyone tonight. My other host, Doreen Bennett, has finally made it in from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think her waka got caught in the current, and she's here now. So, kia ora, Doreen. Welcome to the show.
Kia ora, Mashu, and kia ora koutou katoa to everyone. Hello to everyone listening. And to Belinda. He mihi aroha kia koe, Belinda. It's so nice to have you on.
Oh, Adolfi, thank you, Doreen. I enjoyed your visit, even though it was way too short when you were here last, and I truly love hearing from you and about you.
Doreen and I came back to Missouri, Doreen, Carl, and myself, on the last night of the powwow. So we went right from the airport here in Columbia to the powwow so that we could catch that. and then we ran into Belinda there. So she said she had planned on leaving early, but she's for some reason stuck around, and so we got to see her the first night that Doreen and Carl came back to Missouri before heading out to Oklahoma.
You guys
So
are
that was
so nice.
You're hard to keep up with, you guys.
well, we always heard that a moving target's hard to hit.
Yeah. That is it.
Well, Doreen, we've been talking about all Cherokee culture and the Trail of Tears, the things that Belinda has accomplished and the things that she's planning to do and that we're planning to do together, here in Missouri. And so it's been a really interesting show thus far.
Oh, I said I missed it. But anyway, right. I'm here now. I did want to catch up with you, Belinda, because the last time we were by Mashu's family, we travelled down to Oklahoma, and I know that you're I don't know if it's fully teaching the language, but you do have a part to play in restoration of your language. And we saw that in Oklahoma. It was so nice to see.
Yeah, I was telling her.
Sorry, Mashu?
I said I was telling her about that, how we sat in for a little bit on that language teaching and how impressed I was with that. We weren't invited. We just went in. I was hosting.
Wow.
But it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome.
It sounds wonderful.
So you talk. Is that what you're doing now, Belinda? You're looking at some language classes?
True. We're hoping to begin some language and culture classes. I'm hoping that we are able to begin to raise awareness of the Tsalagi culture. There are a lot of people that I meet that have been involved with the Tsalagi. Many say, "Oh, I have Cherokee ancestry," and yet they know literally nothing about what that means as far as the culture is concerned. So we want to teach the culture as well as the language. Very few know much of anything of the Cherokee language, and it would be important. I want to be able to speak it with people. I know that when I ran into mashu at a powwow and he began speaking to me in my own language, I was just instantly transported back to a much happier time where we sang and we talked and we prayed in that language, and it was just wonderful to hear and be able to speak with somebody. So it would be wonderful to teach more, to speak the language, and to enjoy the culture.
The first time I met Belinda was at a place of business where I was being interviewed by the University of Missouri's linguistics department on the Cherokee language. And the owner of the store said, "I've got this woman that I would like for you to meet. She's Cherokee, and she speaks the language." And I said, "Oh, that would be great." And so in the middle of being interviewed, Belinda walks in, and it was at an appropriate time, and I just turned around and I said, "Osio, dohiju," and she almost started crying. And I just went, "Oh, I didn't say anything wrong. What happened?" And she said she was just so glad to hear someone else speak the language, that she hasn't heard that in years. Is that right? Did I tell the story right, Belinda?
That's true. I believe we engaged in conversation, several back and forth bits of greeting and announcing who we were in our language, and I just felt like I was flying in the clouds. It was a wonderful thing to be able to speak it and have someone speak it back with me. It was I cannot explain the joy that brought to me, because it's not a very common thing.
No, our language is not a common language here anymore, and that's I think the national language is now English, and they're trying to say the second national language is Spanish. And when my mother's mother heard that, she got really mad. She says, we have over, 2,500 native languages and dialects. They could pick just one. What's all this foreign language in our country? And what do you say? You don't do anything in return to your grandmother, because they have the last word. So you just agree with grandmother.
Lucy.
But Belinda, just what you were saying before about language and culture, because I'm like that as well. I believe the two go hand in hand. Is that your thoughts?
Absolutely. That there are many things that you can't really understand why they're spoken that way unless you understand the culture that made that into being. There are times when I'm talking about something, and when I was younger, I would think of it in the Cherokee, and then I would have to figure out how to make it make sense to a person who doesn't know about the culture.
The other thing too, Belinda, and you probably will agree with me on this, is that our language is not spoken like English is. All of our native languages are descriptive languages. And so, and I've used this example before, like if you wanted to use the word snake, today people say, well, what's the Cherokee word for snake? And then you tell them what it is. But it doesn't really mean snake. The word in Cherokee actually means, word for word, the thing that climbs up. Because snakes will climb like that, And that's a different whole thought process for an indigenous person trying to translate into English. And then on top of that, colonization has reached our languages already, our indigenous languages, where they're being spoken more like English instead of the old way. And the example that I use on that is that we were always taught, like, say it's nighttime now, so if I wanted to say good night, we were always taught to say Senoyosta, which means you're actually saying night first, because that's what you're talking about, and then Osta, good, meaning that's describing the night, like good night. Whereas today I've heard most of the teachers say it like they do in English, Osta Senoyi. And to us that's speaking our language words, and the elders don't like that. And one of the other things that I've noticed is in our greeting, we always say Osio, which is equivalent to hello. A lot of the tribes, and I heard this a lot in Oklahoma, they cut that off where they say Sio. Well, the elders that I grew up with said, you don't do that because you're changing the meaning of that. It's taking away the full meaning of our language.
That's correct. It's a difficult thing to draw the line. It's important to be able to teach and reach a lot of people so that there are many who understand the culture and the language. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to take the shortcut and do it the easy way, but that's not always the way that the Tsalagi can be presented. It's like you were saying, the soquili, the horse is a four-legged that carries burdens. It's important to be able to speak plainly and clearly and to think specifically.
Yes, exactly. And you change the whole meaning of something. What you're actually doing is changing the language. And it is historically correct for all languages that they do change with time, but you're getting rid of the essence of the language, and that's one thing that we do not want to lose.
That really kind of frightens me because, how long I know it is a living language, and living languages do change and progress and that kind of thing. However, I wonder if the old ones would be able to understand the Tsalagi that we are speaking today. You know, I would want to be able to. Our people have written works that were written in our own language. It would be a shame to lose the translation and the effect and true meaning of what they were writing about at that time, because the language has changed such.
And because I'm taking my journey in spirit world, and most of you all, just because I'm older, if I'm going to be a speaker of my language and it's changed that much, when I get to spirit world, will they understand me?
Yeah.
They're going to go, what's wrong with that mashu's mouth? Those words are funny.
Oh, yeah.
Of course they will, Mashu. You'll revert back to sign language.
Well, yeah, I could do that, but even the sign language has changed, and they don't mean good things today.
Well, you know enough of our language, so you might end up with ours.
Yeah, I'll have to find something out that understands English, not English, but Cherokee up there. I say, hey, can you translate for me in my relation? Boy, that would be a mess.
It's a fun thing to journey into the thoughts about the next place, the spirit place.
Yeah, I tell you, that's one thing. That's one thing that I'm never worried about, because I am so sure about what it's like, because of our Cherokee way, and I know that that all my relations are going to be there, and then that's when I'll probably learn so much more. Yeah. So, it's something our people are never afraid of. We're never afraid of it because I'm trying to stay away from religious beliefs here now, because you know me, don't you, Belinda? Because
I understand where you're going, and I'm interested to see how you dance around this delicate issue.
Well, let me put it this way: traditionally and spiritually speaking, as a Cherokee believer of the old ways, we do not believe in a devil or a hell. That to us is strictly a white man's belief of a foreign belief in this country, and that's not the way of our people. So in our way, when we take our journey, we go into what we call spirit world, which is equivalent, I would guess, to what Christians call heaven, and we're there for eternity with all of our relations from the beginning of time. So it's like a big family reunion, and we have our relations that have already taken their journey come back and help us on our journey. And so this is why I'm not afraid of death. We have 4 phases of life and 4 seasons and 4 effects that we have on what we call our medicine wheel, which to most people looks like a cross with a circle around it. And that includes the 4 seasons, the 4 phases of life, and each one of those cardinal directions has a certain meaning. And the west to us is black, and that's the journey to spirit world. And our 4 phases of life are birth, childhood, adulthood, and death. And death to us is a very natural part of living. And this is one thing that as Cherokee people, or as indigenous people, I should say, that we were never taught to fear. It's a very natural part of living.
I don't know if it's indigenous. Why? Because I don't have the experience that you do, but I do know that my Cherokee grandparents taught me that the place after this one is very real. Your ancestors are very real, and often things like, do you want my mother to see you acting this way, or your ancestors can see you. It was a very real part of my upbringing that it wasn't just something that you did on Sunday or one day a week. Living with there being a forever was a very real part of everyday life.
Oh yeah, and we were brought up with that too. They're always around us, and they come back sometimes, and you need to do feast for them because they're wanting something in spirit, or they come back because we're needing something, and then you have
right.
to put feast, and things like this. This is an everyday thing. We, in our traditional way, we never took one day aside like other religions in this country that migrated from Europe, where you single out one day where you celebrate or you pray or what is that? At least that's what it looked like to us growing up. Because we did this every day. We started our days with prayers. We ended our days with prayers. There was prayers for everything. Everything we did was a prayer. And so, this is one thing I don't think a lot of people really understand about traditional lifestyle. And it's, if you're not around it, I guess you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But this is the way our traditional life is, and that it's so much a part of us, our spirituality, our traditions, and our culture, that they're all interwoven. We actually practice our spirituality where we don't even have to make literally a conscious effort about it. I mean, we do, but they're so intertwined that it's you can do it like almost on autopilot.
Yeah, we walk and talk our beliefs all the time, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You walk, you talk.
Yeah.
That's the modern way to say it, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it was. We're only just getting back to that. Now, just earlier you were talking about the connection you have to your spirituality and to our ancestors. Now, we've sort of lost that. I'm only recognising it the older I'm getting, because I think you get to an age where you're more aware of what's around us on this plane and the other plane. But the actual connection, because both of you said that you have this strong connection that you feel it's a part of your life. We actually have still lost that, and for a lot of our people, they're still frightened of that side of us. So it's going to be something that'll come back slowly when we start learning. But the other thing,
I think a lot of that has to do with the colonization, though, because I've noticed that with a lot of people, especially the ones who have how can I say that, ones who have been forced to go into believing in Christianity. And our Cherokee people are the same. Like like when I was down in Alabama, we actually have people down there that think Christianity was our traditional belief, and it certainly was not. But I think because of that colonization and what that particular religion teaches, puts fear into people. And I had heard what the Christian missionaries had said, and that was just so foreign to me, about death and what happens when you go to either go to heaven or to this place called hell, And our people never had that. We never ever feared our God. We never ever had to worry about a place, because in our traditional spirituality, our Creator, Great Spirit, was always a creator of loving, forgiving, and understanding. And you knew there was nothing to worry about because you were always forgiven, but you always did good for people. And we had the same lessons, but we had different ways of telling those same stories and teaching those lessons. But I think a lot of people that fear that and don't know that is because the Christian faith was forced on them, and their own spirituality was kind of driven out of them, and they were told that they were bad, they were heathens if they believed in their old ways. fortunately, I was saved from that, and I didn't have to go through that, and it got me to where I was looking into other religions, especially about the time I was going to Vietnam. And I looked into a lot of stuff. Buddhism, Taoism, Chaoism, Christianity, Catholicism, all phases of that. And the only one that actually made sense to me was my own traditional spirituality, because that had all of the answers for it.
Well,
and I think maybe that... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mashu. The thing that I really appreciated about my spirituality, which sounds a lot like what you're describing, is that my relationship with my Creator was between me and my Creator. No one could tell me that I wasn't loving Him correctly. You know, I knew in my heart when I was ignoring Him or being close to Him that was between me and my Creator. My grandmother could encourage and me teach, but it was my responsibility to maintain my relationship with my Creator. That was just a part of being Tsalagi.
Uh-huh. But I think, Doreen, that's maybe why a lot of your people are maybe like with you, because you and I have discussed before how there's a strong Christian influence over there, and maybe that could be, and I'm not saying it is, it's just a hypothesis that maybe this is one of the reasons your people are having a more of a difficult time now with your getting used to your traditional Maori spirituality. What do you think about that?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure that's the reason why. Because as Christianity and the missions and all of them came over and colonized us and everything else they did to us, they actually destroyed our belief system. So that it's only a handful in each tribe that have still got that knowledge, because you can't just we possibly have that direct connection to our spiritual side, to our Wairua, but it was certain people that actually went there in our tribe. But I guess the colonial government and soldiers put into law that we couldn't have our tohunga, our experts that held that knowledge. They also put into law that we couldn't speak our language, so a lot of the traditional belief systems and our values and that are all intertwined with our language, because Pākehā language, mainstream or English language, doesn't reflect fully what we say in Māori. We could get a good translation for some of our words. So I'm sure all of that stuff happened. Like, I don't know if we'll get it back fully, because if we're not well equipped, and I think this is part of our thinking over here, if we're not well equipped to practice our spirituality, our belief systems, and our values, and that we won't get it right. If we don't get it right, we're not going to have the essence of what we were before colonisation.
But the thing is, you have elders there that can get it right, and you're going to have to utilize these elders while they're there. So you're going to make mistakes. This is where you learn from them, and this is where your elders can come in, especially at the iwi level, even at your hapu level. Those are terms like for them, for tribe and Maori and your your family groups, like clan.
Yep, that's right.
And that other generations will learn from the mistakes that you've been taught and brought through, from the mistakes you made, and then, of course, then that can be passed on more correctly.
Yeah, but like we had prayer, our karakia, for everything we did. In the morning, when we got up in the morning, there were prayers, and it's not unusual for some of our elders to say their prayers 5 o'clock in the morning, just before it reaches daylight. That was normal practice, so we still have that happening. But we had our prayers for every meal that we have. We have our prayers, at lunchtime. We have prayers right throughout the day, like you do as well. And unless you understand what you're saying and why you're doing it, it's not somewhere that the average person is going to go. We're trying to teach our young ones at preschool the basics in prayer, like when you have a meal and why we would acknowledge our gods and give thanks. So I think the basics will still happen, but if we really wanted to try and express who we are, then we actually need to know it a little bit more, and then start practicing through prayers for everything.
I've never asked you this before, and I've been over to your country quite a bit, and I've gone to quite a few feasts or meals that they've had at different marae, and then with your family and different families. And I've never noticed this, but I'm just wondering, when we have a feast here with our people, and there's ceremony that goes with that feast, we always have a special dish that's for our ancestors. We call it a spirit bowl. And that just went through my mind. I've never noticed your people ever doing anything like that. Do your people do anything like that, where you put a little bit of everything on there before anybody eats, and you say the prayer to bless the food and the spirit bowl, and then you take the spirit bowl over through the west, because to us that's the gateway to the spirit world, and you put that out for them, and then that's when you start the feast where the elders and the warriors come in, and then it goes on down until the children. And a lot of times these things are done very quietly, and there's not a big deal made out of it, whereas other people I've gone to, and it's part of the it's right out there type of thing. And I've never noticed that with your people, so I was just wondering, do your people do anything similar to that?
No. Well, I've never known it. I belong to 4 tribes that I know, and I haven't known us to do that at all. There are people that may do it over here. It might be Tuwharetoa, the children of the mist, because the stories are around, you call them the little people, we call them pachua. Same thing. They might look a bit different, but they do talk about the stories of the pachua up in Tuwharetoa. So they may, but no, it's not something I've grown up and learned about. I don't even think I've read about it either.
Huh. I know with us, we put a little bit of everything in the spirit bowl of every food that's there, and then we put in tobacco and then water. And then, even if you don't like the food there, you have to take a little bit of everything. You just taste it even. That's on that feast, because our belief is if you don't eat everything or taste it, then our ancestors won't eat it either. And then we put the tobacco in for the blessing.
I saw that mashu at when we went to Milwaukee. I ate a little bit of everything and eat it all.
When Doreen was here, my nephew, which in our Indian way would be my son, he passed away. One of my sons did, and we went to his funeral. So Doreen got to be a part of that experience and experiencing a traditional ceremony in Milwaukee for several days.
But I think the other thing is we never have leftovers. Normally it all goes. So there's no chance that we won't eat it all.
Well, the food that's left over here, because it's already been blessed, we have people take the food home where there's nothing left. And so with us, they're taking food that has been blessed, and they're blessing their homes, and they're taking that blessing to the rest of their family. Yeah. That's the way we look at it. Have you heard that before, Linda?
Yeah, I was thinking not so much of the funeral meal, but also at the Kagalimu, at the Boni Moon Festival, the Kagali. I have always had each of my children invite someone that has gone on to come and meal with us, and they prepare the plate for that individual person and sit beside them, and we do the prayers, and then take it to the West and use that as a way of connecting with our ancestors in a very real way. That's just part of what we do that makes our spirit world very real to us, is that you can invite at the Kagali, which is usually sometime in February, you can invite and have a meal with those that have gone on and invite them to visit, speak, or whatever to you at that point. And it's always been a very important part of observing all of those festivals and celebrations that are part of being Tsalagi.
It always amazed me because we usually would have a woman take the spirit bowl to the West, and you can put it anywhere. You can put it on a fence post, up in a tree, on the ground, under a rock. No matter where you put it, you go back the next day and everything is gone from the spirit bowl. And that, that's always been something that I've just really enjoyed seeing, and that has happened every single time.
Every single time. Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. No matter where you put it, the spirits get it, because especially I was told that always happens if what you're doing is done in a right way and a good way and with your heart. And with us, our ceremonies are always supposed to be done with your heart.
Absolutely.
Tell you, it's nice to hear that, because I think we were, as tribal people and as Indigenous people, we're also aware of not being wasteful. So not only did we have that in mind when we gathered, prepared, and ate our food, but we also had those underlying values that you're both talking about. That was just another level why we do what we do around food.
Oh yeah,
and then,
because there's a spirit with everything that we do. We're connected. Everything is connected, and we're a part of that. We're part of that connection, and so everything has a deep meaning for us as Indigenous people. And I think you even found that out when we were at the UN, and talking with the other tribes from all over the world. They're just like us. That's something I really walked away with. That's what I thought was so awesome about that. No matter what tribe you belong to or where you are on the planet, we are so much alike. It's not even funny.
It's great.
I find a great deal of hope in that the tribal people who are spiritual and connected and walking out the reality of their spiritual beliefs, that there are more of us than I am aware of. I find a great deal of hope in that.
I think with me and the way that I function, I think people who know me really well recognize the spirituality within me, but it's like I purposely, for people who don't know me, don't put it out there. But I can still function in that world, but it never leaves me. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I always do things in a good way. I don't always bring out the spiritual side of me around people that I don't really know until I get to know them. But yet I always do things in a good way. And I mean, to me that makes perfect sense, and that's the way I was brought up, but I don't know if it makes sense to anybody else.
I do. I understand what you're talking about. I had an unexpected guest one year. It's been several years back now at a kaidoi, and we were inviting our ancestors that have gone to the meal with us, and they watched this whole process. It was the evening that there was to be done, and they just happened to be there. So I tried to explain to them that this is what we do and this is why we do it. But they were still a little bit taken aback and a little bit not sure what would happen, because they didn't know whether these, like the media would portray, these ghosts would come in and dance around, and they were terrified actually. Nothing like that happened, but it was interesting to see their reaction to something that we just do out of habit, and it's quite normal to live our spirituality like we mean it and believe it.
Yeah.
That's not a common thing that people who don't live and practice our culture really don't understand, I don't think.
Yeah, and the other thing is that when we did certain ceremonies like that, even amongst my late wife's people, we were always, we were always kind of mindful of who we invited to ceremonies like that, or feasts like that, because we're still guarded about our ceremonies, because I was brought up that there's certain things you don't do in front of non-native people, and especially with our ceremonies, because these ceremonies were given to us by Creator for our people. To do them in front of other indigenous people, that's one thing, but to do them in front of non-native people, that was wrong, and we were taught as children that this is the only way to keep these ceremonies sacred. And in the way that they're meant to be, that their medicine would always be as powerful. And then the older I got, living in two cultures, I go through this phase of, well, if I can explain this a little bit more, maybe people will understand. And then I get to wonder if I'm crossing that line. And, that's always something that's always been in my mind, like, did I step over that? Have I gone too far? Did I share something I wasn't supposed to? And these are things that I've grown up and I've heard all of my elders talk about and say, so you really know if you've overdone it. And so that's why I've always tried to be mindful of the people that I would invite into ceremony, and make sure that they would be the type of person that would understand and not ridicule, number one, and not be a person that would walk away and start telling everybody that our people do this, our people do that, because that's what happened in the beginning of all the myths and stereotyping, is that people would come in and see a ceremony done, whatever ceremony it was, wouldn't fully understand it. Then they go out and write all these millions of books on what their perception as a non-indigenous Christian believing person, what it meant to them. And then this is where all the stereotyping and misconceptions came about our people. This is one of the reasons I lecture today, is to dispel those. So I think as an indigenous person, that's always in the back of our head, where I guess we're more mindful of that than maybe possibly what other peoples are.
Well, in the event that I spoke of earlier, the young lady that was present did have Cherokee ancestry, but her family had not taught or really lived that. She just had the Cherokee ancestors, and had asked about various things. And when I told her that this was a festival evening and that we were doing this and what it meant, she then asked if she could stay. So I know that she respected it, but she really did not know anything about what to expect. And so I'm glad that she was able to see that nobody was swept away in a Hollywood fashion, that we were all quite prayerful and respectful, and I think she was able to emulate that and learn from that.
Because I've had people that were very respectful. I've had most everything has turned out really well, but I've had, we were talking about this soon. Like they have Native ancestry and they want to prove it, and their only concern is like, what can I get out of it instead of what is the essence of being indigenous. And I try to shy away from those people. I'm very respectful, but to me, I just cut them off.
Yeah.
Because that's not what it's about at all.
Yeah. I agree. I feel the same and have behaved in the same manner. I think that you're describing. It's one thing to share everyday things, but when it comes to the sacred, it's hard to know a person's heart. All you can do is look at their behaviors and see if they're saying one thing and acting in the same manner, or if they're saying one thing and acting in another manner. You have to really be careful.
And my beliefs, my spirituality, the essence of who I am, that's not for sale. There can never be a price put on that because that's who I am. So anything that I'm going to get out of anything will be winning the white man's lottery and using that to further the education and spirituality of our people. Oh, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. But you made it funny.
Winning the white man's lottery. That'll be good.
Yeah, to help our people. I think it's only right. Doreen, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just listening. Look, my dad does our old prayers, our old karakia. Yeah, and he's done it for years and years. He hasn't yet found the right person to hand this knowledge on to. So along with prayers has to be all the practices that you do before you recite them. Right, there's certain things that people need to learn. And I was just thinking, I think that knowledge, although we've got it written, we'll go with it. Because if we can't find the right people, that's around him, or even if we as his children haven't been able to find the right person in our extended family, then the knowledge will go with him. So a little bit sad when it does get to that point. He will never publish them. They'll never be published. They'll be written for us as a family. But if we don't pick them up, he will not want us to say them without knowing everything about them. It's a good 300 or 400 prayers that he's got that are old prayers that acknowledge, our thinking is in our forest, the Ngati, that belongs to the realm of Tāne Mahuta, who is one of the gods of Rangi and Papa, who are the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. So, it embodies our worldview of who we were as Māori people. And
but
unless
is there anyone in your immediate family that can do that? In your immediate family? Is there not someone that could take on that responsibility?
Not at the moment. It would probably need to be a male, and that's not for any particular reason, but normally that's the work of the men. Although women have karakia, have our own prayers, that's a male. That's the work that he learned. He would pass it on to another male. No, we haven't. We haven't really, and he needs someone that's not going to let it be distorted by knowing religion, which is what a lot of people do know, the Christian believers. So, more than likely it will go when he goes. Which is
Well, that's sad because I've listened to your father do karakia, meaning I've listened to your father do prayers and stuff, as well as other of the respected elders in Aotearoa, and that would be sad to have that lost.
But he won't be he'll be doing it in a way where his thinking will be he needs to keep us all safe. Because if we start going back into our old traditions and our old belief systems, we need to know it well. Otherwise, don't go there yet. Don't go there. And that's his thinking is, if they're not ready, he can't pass it on. And it'll keep us safe.
And that's the same way it is with us. The old ways you don't play with unless you know what you're doing, because it can come back on you and the ones that are involved with whatever ceremony or gathering that you have.
Yeah, well, it's okay though. Like we're just one family. Different families in our tribe also hold prayers, karakia, traditional ones. So, and they may find someone to pass this knowledge on to. Just in our family, and I've got 60 first cousins. None of us are ready. None of us are ready to hold that kete, to hold that basket of knowledge. Right, we've got quite a... Pardon?
I thought our people were bad. 60 first cousins. That's a lot of fun.
Well, in their family, there were 13 brothers and sisters. Most of the 13 had 8 or 9 children, and that's, my brothers and sisters. There's 9 of us.
Yeah. Yep.
We sort of slowed down when it got to my generation. We've only managed to do 1 or 2, the average.
Well,
but that's not how you keep your bloodline strong. You need more children to keep our bloodline strong.
Yeah. Our people needed them just because we were still getting shot at, so we had to have large families. Maybe out of 15, 20 kids, one would survive. I'm
glad we aren't at the age at the time, so we were happy to dodge bullets and pretend to be anything but vigilant. I'm glad we experienced that.
Exactly. That's the one thing that I have to say is, through all the nonsense that our people have gone through in the last almost 600 years, it's been our spirituality and it's been our sense of humor that has helped us endure this last 600 years. Because without those two things, people would not have made it this far. And we are still here. And we are still a part of this history. And we are still making history. And even I always think of myself sometimes as being quite insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But since we went and were able to go to New York for the United Nations, and I've seen these other people, so we were all together, that's changed my way of thinking. Because all of us together can make a big difference, and I just see so much potential in that. So that was like, for me, even though it may not appear to some people, that was a life-changing thing for me to see all of my people together like that. I didn't want to come back. If I hadn't come back, I'd probably be dead now, because I did get pneumonia there. But leave it to me. But that was just so good. We have 90 seconds left on the program, and I'm going to go around the group and ask for people for their closing comments if they'd like to say anything. And I'm going to start with our guest, Belinda. Do you have any closing comments that you would like to say for this evening?
I would like to say thank you for this opportunity to speak about my And I'll hurry because now we only have 60 seconds. And thank you for all the work that you and Doreen are doing in bringing the Indigenous peoples together. I think that's wonderful and very hopeful. Thank you.
Okay. Doreen?
And thank you, Belinda. I'm so sorry I missed the first hour, but I have got to talk to you tonight on the show. Thank you so much for being on. And just in regard to spirituality, you know, when we look at the wellness of our people, you know, we look at Te Whare Tapawha, the four cornerstones of health, which are the Hininaro, the mind, the tinana, the body, whānau, our family, which is our spirituality. That's what we need to look at to find balance to make us well. Kia ora tātou katoa.
Oh, two dogs.
I just want to say it's been Ostadad to sit here and listen to you, Belinda, and may you keep everything in your heart and go in goodness.
Okay. Jimmy, do you have anything you'd like to say tonight?
Well, I'd like to second what Two Dog had to say there, and you know, keep going with it. And I'd like to say to everybody else out there, Sonoli Alstai, Aladona Daga Ha'i, Igayui, my relations. And back to you, Mashu.
I'd like to say, until we meet again, all of our friends and our relations. Donada.